Doctor Who is a universe full of universes. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. Beyond the TV narrative, there is a great deal more stuff bulking out the already rich library of Doctor Who lore. Find an obscure element, do a little digging, and wow, bet you didn't know that. Here's something I recently came across that I find extremely cool. So much so that it drove me to contact one of the writers behind it, but more on that later. Check this out. Being one to scout for mysteries, a lot of things piqued my interest when I made a video about the 1970 Jon Pertwee serial Inferno. So many rabbit holes. Where did the Prime Order originate from? How effective is Venusian karate? Has Doctor Who ever been mentioned in a Batman comic? And all of these seem to have rather interesting answers. And then there was this guy. A man on a poster. Above the words, "Unity is strength." A fleeting prop at best. Does it even mean anything? Well, you better believe it has a backstory, or should I say, forward story. To quickly recap, Inferno saw the third Doctor travel into a parallel universe where everything was the same but a great deal less fun. Instead of old, goofy, lovable, highly useless and gloriously expendable unit, we had these mean twits. The Republican Security Forces, led by this man, the Brigade Leader. Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart's grumpy, one-eyed parallel universe counterpart. In this universe, Britain was less of a democracy and more of a security state, and the military was running the show. Put it this way, if I lived in this universe and I called the RSF mean twits, well, I'd be executed. Simple as that. Inferno provides you with a couple of facts about this parallel Britain, about how the royal family was assassinated and how the security state is now in control. From this you're led to assume that unity is strength is a party slogan, and this guy, whoever he is in charge. But seeing as this entire reality falls victim to a volcanic fallout inferno, avid watchers of Doctor Who never received any resolution past that point. So who is this guy? Well, I'll tell you who he is. He's BBC special effects designer Jack Kine, who funnily enough worked on The Mind Robber, which I've waffled about extensively in previous videos. He dropped by for a fleeting cameo in Inferno and yep, I think it's fair to say that he plays the part really well. By that I mean he posed really well for that photograph. Given the suppressive viciousness of this whole Republican Security Forces thing, his slogan peddling cold dead stare makes him a solid looking candidate for the leader. You want to kick this guy's cat? Well, just don't. And that's it. Nothing else to see here. Except, you would not believe what certain Doctor Who writers went and did with this picture. Okay, stop. I'm about to plug some really cool pieces of Doctor Who literature here, warts and all. If you don't want anything spoiled, then do click away now, but then go read the stuff and come back. You better believe that the leader does have a backstory, except that it wasn't established until 2 decades later. But I'm going to skip 30 years on from that and land us firmly in the present. You see, this parallel Earth, doomed to destruction in Inferno, does actually get its fair share of revisitation in written form. Amidst the expanse of written Doctor Who novels set solely around the iconic Lethbridge Stewart and his unit allies, a certain book titled Schizoid Earth, written by David McKinty and published back in 2015, told a highly intricate origin story of Brigade Leader, which sported more than a few twists along the way. But if you really want to get into the bones, brains and guts of Inferno Earth and its resident Lethbridge Stewart, Robert Mamone's I, Alistair is the book for you. It tells the story of ruthless Alistair's equally ruthless investigation into a rebellious plot to dismantle the party. You're basically siding with the bad guys on this one, but in doing so you get to explore all their vulnerabilities and inner struggles. It's a really great read. The book also contains the short story Ashes of the Inferno, which acts as a nice little bridge between Inferno and the Schizoid Earth. As for the leader, he's here alright, be it a paranoid, decrepit version of him. He's on his last legs. Paranoia runs rife in his withered mind. He appears to be a mere shell of the steely face in this picture. So begins a petty quarrel for succession among his elite council. And here's a couple of other pointers you learn in this book. Legend has it that the leader can live for a countless age. Legend also has it that the leader once had the ability to extend his life through some miraculous procedure. By a slip of the tongue, the leader also refers to his heart in plural, meaning he has more than one. Wait, what? 2 hearts? A death-cheating procedure? Could the leader be A Time Lord? That's the only explanation, right? And yet, nothing else in this book even remotely pertains to anything close to Gallifreyan. It kind of doesn't add up. So who is this two-hearted menace with supposed regenerative qualities? Nope, not that one. This 2020 novel with its Time Lord dictator lurking in the background has actually pulled on a thread first created in a book published way back in 1991. When what we now know as classic Doctor Who was canned back in 1989, the new Doctor Who Adventures book series sought to continue the adventures of Sylvester McCoy's Doctor and his companion Ace, and those of you familiar with that series will probably also remember the Time Worm saga. The Time Worm was a complex and dangerous foe, sort of everywhere and nowhere, finite and infinite, so baffling in its existence that it even seemed to confuse itself, and the Doctor needed all of his past selves to chip in some abstract fashion to defeat it. Which brings us to the fourth and final volume, Paul Cornell's Time Worm Revelation. In the latter half of the book, long story short, the 7th and the 3rd Doctor are stuck in a prison cell together, at which point the 3rd Doctor drops the mother of all bombshells. Turns out, shortly after the events of Inferno, the 3rd Doctor remembered where he'd previously seen the face of the leader. It was in fact one of the faces offered to him by the Time Lords during his trial on Gallifrey in the 2nd Doctor's exit story, War Games. Most likely that one. As we all know, the Doctor rejected all of those choices. But what if he accepted one? What if this parallel universe had a parallel Doctor? And what if that parallel Doctor was a bit of a git? That's right folks, the leader ain't just a Time Lord, but an evil version of the Doctor himself. And whilst banished to Earth much like the good Doctor was in our world, he decided to go all Harold Saxon and become Prime Minister, furthermore plunging Britain into a totalitarian rule. Whilst our good Doctor has spread his good across the world, the evil Doctor did the yin-yang equivalent, and everything you see that's bad in this Inferno world is a result of his actions. I'm not going to give too much away of Alistair, only that the leader serves primarily as a background character, and I was itching to find out more. So I contacted Robert Mamone, who was more than happy to reply with some additional info. Thank you for that, Robert. He said the following. In terms of adding the backstory, I was inspired in part by Joseph Stalin. He had a large bodyguard to protect him as his paranoia grew worse. He would never sleep in the same bedroom to foil assassination attempts. All the material created for the leader in Alistair I devised. I'm a history buff, as well as keen on alternate history. So I cherry-picked bits and pieces from history to assist with creating the backstory for the leader's rise. All my inspiration for the character, from his willingness to play colleagues off against each other to cement his own hold on power, to certain personal foibles and characteristics, are all taken from my history reading. I didn't have to work with anyone to flesh him out, as I had all that inspiration in my head or at my fingertips. I felt it useful to have the leader in place, so we can see the other centres of power in the cabinet contrasted against him, as they orbit him and jockey for power. While I did involve him a little in my novel, ideally the leader's a background character onto which people can project their own fears and hopes. Obviously, the idea that the leader is an alternate Doctor is clearly a fan creation. The 90s were like that. A lot of fan writers who cut their teeth in fanzines got a chance to enter the professional writing team and unloaded all their good and bad ideas into their work. Cornell really was a trailblazer in that regard. While Time Worm Revelation might be considered the sort of angsty symbol-laden book a teenager might write, Cornell had the advantage of being a very good writer. I'll let you in on a little secret to close with. While I was writing the book, it never entered my head that fan myth decided that the leader was in fact an alternate Doctor. I mean, yes, I read Revelation back in 1991, but that is a long time ago. All the while, in my head, the leader was just another in a long line of very human tyrants, and certainly not an evil alternate version of the Doctor. I'm delighted though that you and others have picked up on the idea and are inspired and intrigued by it. So I figure from that these two heart regeneration references are actually a post-editorial thing perhaps. Still awesome. In 1970, this really was just a mean looking man in a picture as far as audiences were concerned, and nothing of this concept was introduced until 20 years later in the Time Worm Revelations book, and it would be a total of 50 years before it was further developed in I, Alistair. That said, watching Inferno back with these new implications in mind really does add an extra chilling sense to the story. Shots like this one really send me bananas. It's almost like he's looking at his good counterpart and at us the viewers and saying, haha, yep, I did this. Believe me when I say that this Easter egg, if you will never be developed in TV. Literally never. And it only has a blink and you'll miss it ripple across written Doctor Who content. And I think that's why I love it so much. It's so small in scope, yet so massive at the same time, and it leaves a hell of a lot of room for the imagination to fill in. And I also love that it took several decades for one writer to utilise the idea of another writer, who in turn simply added a small layer to an arbitrary bit of TV trivia. As a result, and 50 years on, something awesome was created. You want to know what happens to the leader in I, Alistair? Follow the link in the description. While you're there, don't forget to hit subscribe. Have a good one.